Thanks everyone for joining. I'm just going to do like a quick presentation. If you have any questions like in the middle of it, you can go ahead and just ask me, but I also have like time at the end for questions as well. So a little bit about myself. My name is Natalie. I go to San Jose State. I am a chemistry with a concentration in biochemistry major. I actually just declared a minor in psychology just a few days ago. I'm on a pre-health track, which means basically like pre-med, but not really medicine, because I either want to go into pharmacy or PA, and that's kind of just like a self-declared thing. It's not really something that is associated with school. So I graduated MHS 2018, and I'm hoping to graduate SJSU spring 2022, so that'd be a full 4 years. And so here's some basic information about San Jose State. So if you don't know, it's a California State University. So within California, there's public universities, which are California State Universities and University of California, which are like the UCs, and there's also private universities. So San Jose State is a state university. Tuition is about $8,000 per academic year. So that's spring and fall, not including summer or winter. Sorry, I don't know what happened. Okay, let me do this again. Just a heads up, my Wi-Fi is a little bit finicky, so that's probably what happened. Okay, so back to what I was saying. SJSU is semester-based, so same thing as in high school, where it starts in August for the fall up to December for fall, and then spring would be late January to early May. And so within San Jose State, there are 6 colleges: the College of Education, College of Engineering, Health and Human Sciences, Humanities, Arts, Social Sciences, and Science. And so from my experience at San Jose State so far, I'm finishing up my 2nd year. And since I'm a biochem major, I've taken foundational chemistry and biology classes. So these classes are what science majors take. So there's chemistry for science majors, biology for science majors, and then there's also like chemistry and biology for non-science majors that other people could take. I've also taken a calculus class, so basic math class in college. I'm finishing up the 2nd part of OChem, organic chemistry, and I've also taken a class called quantitative chemistry, and all these have labs, so also with labs. My freshman spring semester, I was part of this program called FIRES, which was a new program where they're introducing research opportunities to freshmen. And then so for extracurriculars, I'm involved in pre-pharmacy club, chemistry club. I also just joined a psychology research lab, and specifically for my lab, we're researching the effects of caffeine on memory consolidation. Currently, I work as a pharmacy technician at CVS Pharmacy, and I also volunteer under Santa Clara Valley Medical Center at one of their pharmacies. This pharmacy is called Better Health Pharmacy, and it's a free pharmacy for anyone in the area or just anyone at all. And yeah. So I wanted to mention that San Jose State is actually in the process of building a new science building. So it's called the Interdisciplinary Science Building. And so if you guys were interested in going to San Jose State or were committing to San Jose State anytime soon, this is supposed to be finished, I believe. It was expected 2022, but with everything going on, it's probably going to be postponed. But yeah, just a thought, they're under construction right now, and it's supposed to be like this really beautiful building with a bunch of new labs. So for anyone going into science, yeah. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have. I can try to answer any questions you guys have as best as possible. I am a chemistry major, so I don't know too much about, let's say, something from engineering, but I can try to answer your questions as best as possible. So yeah, you guys can like unmute your mics or type it in the chat, whatever is best. Yeah, so for FIRES, it was called, FIRE stands for Freshman Initiative in Research. And so San Jose State got a grant just that semester when it started, to help bring um, more freshmen into research. So since I'm in the College of Science, basically there's a bunch of like chemistry labs and biology labs. And under those, there's a bunch of different professors who have um, individual like research that they do on their own. And so all professors are basically constantly trying to recruit new students to be in their research lab. And then so for FIRES, it was basically, it was like half a semester where they taught us basic skills that you would use in a research lab. So like pipetting and just very foundational stuff that you would traditionally do in research labs. And at the end of that semester, I actually did not continue on with the research class because I found that I personally didn't like it. So research is it's really interesting because it's not for everyone. Because research, basically, you're kind of cooped up in a lab, and it really depends on the person. Like if you're okay just working on your own stuff for like hours at a time. For me, I like really wanted that human interaction with people, so I just did not do well in the research. But at the end of that program, they went on to different professors' lab in the summer for I think it was 2 weeks. And then so they got a feel of what it's like being in a research lab. And then after those 2 weeks, I know a bunch of the students joined those professors' labs. So they basically are in their labs right now, and um, towards whatever the goal of that research lab is. And I'm also in a psychology research lab. So this one is more, well, obviously it's different from science, so it's not in the lab. This is a psychology research, so it's more with like experiments with people, I guess. So this one we're working on the effect of caffeine. So I haven't started yet because I was in the middle of it when school got shut down and everything. So, but basically for this one, we're more interacting with people and really seeing the effect of caffeine. We do like memory tests. And so that's a very different aspect than a research experience in a lab per se. Okay. What is student life like at San Jose State? Um, so I would say a huge part of San Jose State culture is that it's very commuter oriented, because it is in the middle of like San Jose, it's in the downtown. A lot of the students are already from the area, and so a huge majority of the student population, I would say, are commuters. So they basically drive to school. I mean, people do dorm, and there are people who come from not in the area, but I would say if uh, I think it's a little bit hard being a commuter. Definitely, like for me, my experience was it's harder to really make friends as opposed to if you're going to a different school not in this area and you're not from there and you're dorming, because in a dorming situation you are surrounded with a bunch of people and it's a lot easier to make friends. And so if you go to a school where you commute, a lot of people kind of have the mindset like, oh, I come to school to go to class and then I go home. So I would say if you were looking to really like make friends and to branch out at San Jose State specifically, it's really important to join clubs. It's not always just like, for me, I'm involved in like pre-professional clubs, but there's also a bunch of social clubs on campus, and those are more geared towards, I guess, like finding your group of people in college. Um, and then what else about student life? Yeah, I think that would be the biggest thing. Like, it's important to really just put yourself out there and join things in order to, create a student life for you there. because there's a lot of clubs. There's really a lot of clubs at San Jose State. And I mean, there's also like sororities, frats. I don't know too much about those, but I know there's a bunch. And yeah. Okay, next question. How are you satisfying your PA school clinical hour requirements? I'm considering being a PA, and I know a lot of schools have 1,000+ hour requirements, so I was curious as to how you're fulfilling that. Okay, so I was actually pre-pharmacy for like, I'm a second year now, but I was focused on pharmacy for a while, and it wasn't really until recently that I like really considered PA. And so that's why I have a lot of pharmacy experience right now. I'm a licensed pharmacy technician, and I am volunteering at a pharmacy. And so I did that for like, I got involved with that my first year of college. And then it's only now where I'm really considering PA. And then that is a little bit of a shift for me, because for PA school clinical hours, it's a little bit different to achieve or it's a little bit difficult to achieve, because a lot of the jobs that satisfy that requirement, you have to be, let's say, licensed or certified, which requires more school. So basically like going to school on the side of your undergrad. And so I'm still in the works of figuring it out right now, because I know like medical assistant or phlebotomist or EMT, those things you really have to go to school for before you can really get a job for it. So I'm actually considering a gap year after I graduate undergrad, so that I can fulfill those hours, just because it is a lot of hours that they need. And so you really do need to set aside the time. But if you're already thinking about being a PA before you go into college, then I think it's important to get started on that as soon as possible. But there are also actually options where you don't have to be certified before. So I was looking at being an optometry assistant. Those ones, if you go to your like local optometry offices, you can just always ask them if they're hiring, because most of the time they will train you on the job instead of requiring certification. Yeah, so if the question was just about the clinical requirements, I'm still working that out right now. But yeah, I mean, if you know that's what you want to do, then I would say like go for it as soon as possible, just so you can figure out how you're going to get all those hours while you're still an undergrad. But there's never anything wrong with, also taking time like a gap year to fulfill those requirements as well. Okay. With a high impact, is it hard to pick classes? And is there a way to get priority? Okay, so a big thing at San Jose State is it's a pretty big school. And it's not as big as compared to, let's say, like UC. Oh my God, sorry again. Oh no. Okay, let me finish this question, but the other question seemed to have disappeared. So if you guys could just chat it again, and then I'll answer them. So in terms of being impacted, so San Jose State is a pretty big school, but let's say it's not really as big as a UC. So like UCLA, UC Irvine, all those other schools, in terms of student population, it's a lot bigger. But for San Jose State, with the number of students that it already has, it is pretty impacted. So you'll hear that a lot about San Jose State, about how it's a very impacted school. And that's because they admit a lot of students. I know just last fall, they admitted like way too many students than they should have. And I think it's because, so they try to accept as many students as possible, but they kind of push that limit too much, which makes it difficult for students who are already there to get classes that they need. And so with that comes a lot of stress for students. And so when you go to San Jose State, a lot of people will kind of say that, oh, it's hard to graduate in 4 years. And so it's honestly true. but I don't think it's impossible to graduate in 4 years. So you just have to know what classes you need to take, and it's just a lot of responsibility on your part to make sure that you have to take the classes that you need as soon as possible, and then like failing a class as well will also like push you back. So you just have to really keep in mind, like if you're trying to graduate in 4 years, just be sure to keep track of really what you need. For me personally, I haven't had any problems with registering for classes that I need. Let's say a class that I need is full. There will be another section usually. Unless it's a big class, then they usually don't get as full. I would say for majors within science, it's not as hard to get classes that you need. But in that case, you could also have to choose sections which are like different times that you don't really want. So let's say you need a specific class, right? But you want it at 8 a.m. But that 8 a.m. class is already full. You just have to sacrifice and take like the 4 p.m. one if it's offered. And that's just something that requires a little bit of sacrifice. Like if you're really focused on graduating on time, and that's more important to you than getting the class schedule that you want, then I would say just to take it. Because sometimes people don't graduate on time because they don't want to take like a specific professor that's only teaching that semester or a specific time. I think if you were to go in, I'm not exactly sure, but I would say maybe like business, one that's like super popular, it might be harder to get classes for that major. But at least for science, it's usually just having to switch your schedule around in terms of times, but it hasn't been that hard to get classes. And another thing, how to get priority. So I think it was my first semester. Sometimes there's this thing called being a note taker. So we have this thing called Accessible Education Center. So it's people with disabilities that request different accommodations for their classes. So sometimes you'll get an email and it'll be like, oh, there's someone that has a disability in your class and they need a note taker. So basically you just have to apply for it. I'm not sure how they pick who it is, but I applied for it one time and then they said, oh, you're the note taker now. So you don't know who you're taking notes for. Basically it's all anonymous. You just upload your own notes for that class, and then it gets shared with them. And so that actually gives you priority registration for the next semester. And priority registration gives you the registration date, like the very first day that you're able to register. So that helps out a bunch. I've done it, I think, twice. You can't really choose like if you'll get the chance to be that, but I would say if it comes up, you should take it because it'll give you priority registration. Another thing is, there are some jobs on campus that will give you priority registration. My friend is a tutor at the College of Science, and he gets priority registration for being a tutor. I'm pretty sure a majority of jobs don't actually give you priority registration, but it's specifically ones I think that help students. So like tutor positions, mentor positions, things like those will give you priority. And then I believe it also gets easier, like let's say you're a graduating senior, they will prioritize you in getting your classes. So they'll make sure you get your classes before the sophomores and the juniors. But yeah, and it's also important, I think, to take advantage of like classes that you can take over the summer, especially for GEs, because those ones will fill up pretty quickly. So if you just want to make sure that you graduate on time, you can always take your GEs, which are basically probably your first 2 years of just general education. There's specific classes that you need to take, but a bunch of them you could actually take at a community college over the summer or during the winter or anything, and that could help you out as well. Okay, what jobs does a biochem major open up that you know of other than PA or pre-pharm, and how do you get research opportunities? Okay, so for jobs, a lot of the jobs will probably be in research. And so like living in the Silicon Valley, there's actually a bunch of biotech companies here in the area, in San Francisco, here, even in Milpitas, there's a bunch. And so I think this major really opens up a lot of those research opportunities, a lot of those job opportunities. So usually those jobs will just ask for a major such as biochemistry, chemistry, molecular bio, all those things, but specifically research experience as well. So they want you to have research experience before you go into these jobs. But I know usually a lot of the jobs for biochem majors usually go into research. I mean, you could always do teaching as well if you want to go forward in your education and get a master's and or your PhD. You could also go into teaching. Let's see. With biochem, I would say it's pretty versatile. Let's see. Off the top of my head, I mean, you could also go into pre-med or any pre-health, really, if you want to go to grad school, if that's what you want. But other jobs, I'm thinking, I think research would definitely be a main one. Yeah, I can't think of any right now off the top of my head, but yeah. Okay. And so how do you get research opportunities? So it's actually a lot easier than it seems. So so a lot of professors will talk about their research and what they're doing. They'll also say if they're looking for people, and so you can just reach out to them, really. You can just email them and say, hey, like, this is my name, I'm this year, and I'm interested in joining your research. And so they'll probably set up a meeting with you and tell you more about their research. And then, you know, if it works out, it depends on each professor, really, if they'll really interview you or ask you for any experience, but usually they'll take you even if you have no experience, because they're always willing to have more people in their lab to help out. So I would really say just to reach out to professors. Even walking around on campus in like science buildings and stuff, you'll see a bunch of like posters and it'll be like this professor's research. And if you're interested in that, you can always visit them also at their office hours. So I think a big thing would really to be just to reach out to them. Nothing hurts from reaching out to them. And all the professors I've talked to really have been super helpful. And even if, let's say, you meet with them and you hear about their research and you're like, oh no, like that does not interest me at all. Like they honestly don't get offended. Like if you don't like it, then there's nothing wrong with saying no. Okay, have you looked into internships? Yeah, so I've actually looked into a bunch of internships. So SJSU partners with this job site called Handshake. And so I looked on there pretty often, just about a bunch of like different internship opportunities. I think right now, after finishing my second year, I think this would be the perfect time to have an internship this year or after my junior year. Because at that point, I'll have a lot more lab experience. Right now, I think I have a good amount of lab experience, but I think not enough. Some internships really look for a lot of lab experience, and specifically a lot of science lab experiences. So I don't quite have that yet. So I still do look at them and look for any that will be willing to like take someone who doesn't have that much experience. But I think it's definitely important to build your experience before you apply for these internships. But there's always a bunch that are offered, especially in the summer. I think summer is the best time to get these internships. Some main companies here in the Bay Area would be Genentech, Thermo Fisher, like Roche, Johnson and Johnson. There's like really a bunch here in the Bay Area. Like right here is probably the perfect place where you could get an internship without having to travel very far. And so if you're interested in getting an internship, I think it's important to get started with a research lab, specifically a science research lab, if you want to go into a science internship, because it'll really help you show them that you have experience. Because a lot of the things, sometimes they'll be very specific as to what techniques you need to know. So if you get those specific techniques from a lab, then it could really help you out with your application and then just basically knowing what to do for the internship. Do you have any general tips for incoming college freshmen? Any general tips? Yeah. Let's see. So I would say it sounds kind of cliche, but I guess really just put yourself out there. Um, I guess going into college, whether or not you're going to be dorming or commuting, it's really just like a whole new thing for you. You know, everyone is basically starting fresh at college. And so in lecture halls, like for me, your first year, if you have big lecture halls, it'll be really difficult to make friends because it's a huge thing. And sometimes people kind of just, you know, sit by themselves. And so I sat by myself for a bunch of those lectures. And I guess you just want to build a community, especially in bigger classes. It's hard to make friends. And so I would just really just sit next to someone and start talking to them. And it's because it's really important to make friends in your classes, you know, just in case, like, let's say you don't go to class, you miss something, anything like that. I think it's important to just really just make friends within your classes. And also to talk to your professors, get to know your professors. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult to talk to a professor, especially if they're teaching a big class. It's really hard to like get to know the professor. And so you could always go to their office hours as well. Okay. Yeah, so just getting to know your professors is really important. I would say especially if you want to go to grad school afterwards, because you always need letters of recommendation, and so you can get those from professors. Also to join clubs, there's nothing wrong with trying out a club. So let's say you join you, I feel like, I guess you're just not committed to a club, right? If you go to one meeting. So don't feel like you have to keep going to a club even if you don't enjoy it. So you can always just try it out. Like go to one meeting. If you don't like it, then just don't go back. There's nothing wrong with, I guess, just trying out what works for you and what you want. Um, any other tips? Also, college is I think it will test um your motivation and how you are as a student, because it's very different from high school. So you basically make your own schedule. You can choose your classes whatever time you want it to be, and attendance is not mandatory in college. And so it hits everyone different. So if you're very motivated in your learning and you can go to class, then that's good for you, and you learn that in college, because a lot of times, you know, some people who struggle with really showing up to class, you know, it kind of hits them in college because it's like you don't have to go. You're not judged or you're not graded by your attendance. So if you don't go, it really only hurts you. And so I think it's really important to attend your lectures, even if you don't think they're important. It really helps to build that habit of knowing that, you know, you have to go to class, and it'll help you more than anything. It's also a lot of self-learning. So sometimes when you get that bad teacher in high school, you're like, oh, I have to teach myself everything. But honestly, college is all that. You won't always have the best professors, and you really have to go out of your way to teach yourself something. So if you genuinely care about that class and that subject, you have to put in a lot of effort to learn it. Because if you don't, then it's only gonna hurt you in the long run. Because each class, like the further you progress with these higher class, with these upper division classes, it's going to be more and more self-teaching. So you really just have to, I guess, put in the effort. College definitely requires a lot of your effort when it comes to learning something. Can you talk about some of the clubs on campus? Yeah, so like I said, I'm involved in pre-pharmacy club, and so I joined, I think, my first semester, and basically they introduced me to a lot of experiences. So they actually helped me to know some of the things that I could do for pharmacy. So one of the officers said he works at CVS as a pharmacy technician. And so I always, like, I didn't know anything about that. And so he actually told me that you don't need any experience to go into it. And they will actually train you on the job. And then after a specific number of hours, you can become licensed as a pharmacy technician. And so that's what I did. And so I got that from that club. And I also learned about the volunteer opportunities that Santa Clara Valley Medical Center offers from that club. Chemistry club, I'm not like super involved in, but I know they host research seminars on Tuesdays, and so basically like professors from different universities, even within San Jose State, different professors come and they just present the research. So they just give I think like an hour-long talk talking about what their research labs are. And yeah, so you can always just go to those and learn more about different professors' research labs. They also offer, so chemistry club offers like a room, like they have their own room. So if you're a member of that club, you can go to that room and they have like snacks and stuff. So I think that club is especially good for like networking, same as pre-pharmacy club. There's a bunch of pre-health organizations. So if that's what you're into, like going into grad school, there's a bunch like pre-med, pre-PA, pre like optometry, and then there's a bunch of also like social clubs. So they're like, I forgot, like in high school you call it like clog rush, and in college within the first few weeks there's just a bunch of tables like around campus with the different clubs, and they're basically just tabling, and you could always just walk by, ask them more about their clubs and whatnot. There's a social club called Akbayan, which is a Filipino club, but you don't have to be Filipino to join. And it's a really big club. It's one of the biggest clubs at San Jose State, where it's just a social club basically. So you can join and to make a lot of friends. I believe they put you within like houses, and then so it's kind of like you have your own like family or group of people. And then those are the clubs that I can name off the top of my head. But yeah. Is there a strong Greek life presence at San Jose State? I'm not sure how to dictate whether it's strong or not, but I know there's a bunch of frats and sororities. There's this one specific stretch on campus called 7th Street, and they table there a lot. So there will be a lot of like frats or sororities there just trying to recruit people. So I would say I think there's definitely a bunch of Greek life. There's also like when you're driving to school, there's like a whole street, all just their housing. So I'm not like super sure if it's like really strong, but I know there's a bunch of options. Is it true that CSUs prepare you more for your careers and are more hands-on than a UC? Let's see. I don't know specifically like if it prepares you more than a UC. I can't like say, and I can't vouch for someone who goes to a UC, but one thing I would say is that CSUs are definitely smaller than UCs. So class sizes are a lot more intimate, and it's not small as in like high school small, where it's like 30 people. And it's not as small as some private schools, but it's definitely smaller than UCs. And so what that gives you is, so your foundational classes, like your first few years, will be pretty big. But I think the biggest it will ever be, like my organic chemistry class was probably the biggest, and that is max like 200 people. And so that sounds like a lot of people, but you go to like UC Berkeley or somewhere, and their lectures are huge, like hundreds of people. And so that makes it super difficult to get to know the professor. And makes it difficult to network, because there's just so many students. And so I think it's a lot more intimate within your professors, like within labs as well. Like in the labs that I've been, it's been like 30 people to like 20, even less than 20. And so it really just gives you a chance, you know, to ask more questions and to be known by your professors or your instructors or anything. Um, in terms of curriculum, I mean, I'm not sure that there would really be a difference, um, one versus the other. I think with uh, something that I would have to say is like UCs, they're amazing schools. You know, they're really good schools. But something also is like all the UCs are very, very competitive. And so sometimes with being a super competitive school, there's a culture around being very cutthroat. And so like within the students, it's kind of just very competitive with one another. And so at San Jose State, like you don't feel that at all. Like within your classes, you don't feel that like everyone's trying to do better than everyone else, you know? Everyone is basically just doing their own thing, trying to learn and just trying to like go forward. So you don't really feel that very like cutthroat vibe. Um, I mean, I don't really know what would differentiate like the UC and then the UCs. I think I've also heard that like CSUs are more like prepare you more for your career than UCs. I think maybe because UCs are also very research oriented, so they really push for research at UCs. So that might be why. And then CSU is more like application, but I can't say that for sure. But I would say that San Jose State is a great school because of its location. And so if you want to go into why is it just me?
Oh, see, now it's working.
No, I think it's the room.
Wait,
Sorry. I don't know like why Alpha's is fine and mine isn't. I think it's like my room is like the furthest from the Wi-Fi, so it just always breaks up. Um, but yeah, so San Jose State, it's located in the heart of Silicon Valley. And so we're here in San Jose. And so there's a bunch of biotech companies, like I said earlier. And so you just have so many opportunities here at your hand, as opposed to you go to a different school where there's not as many opportunities around that area. And so it's really harder to, you know, like network, find a job in that area. So this is good. As I say, it's good for like the companies around the area like biotech, but also tech tech companies, you know, like Google, Apple, those, oh, Facebook, like there's a bunch around here. And so I know for like computer science, um, software engineering, all those things, you'll have so many opportunities, specifically at San Jose State, just because we're located to so many of these companies. Um, what were the other questions? Sorry.
everyone who had their question after Marilyn's question about the CSUs is gonna have to like type it up again. So that
I'm so sorry.
I just copy and paste. It should.
Sorry, guys. It's just not working out.
It's okay. Do you need me to do you see any of the questions or do you need me to retype them?
Can you actually retype them?
Yeah.
Sorry. That's fine. Okay. What is a favorite slash worst memory from San Jose State? Uh, I think the worst, I don't have a like specific one worst memory, but the worst experiences that I have at San Jose State are definitely with parking. And so, bye. Okay. So definitely parking. Because there's so many students that drive to school, there's just not enough parking. And so it's a huge issue with San Jose State. Like you'll hear about it a lot where I mean, we have 3 parking garages and they're pretty big, but everyone just goes to school at the same time. And so it's so difficult to find parking. So you really have to go to school pretty early. Like I would say 9 a.m. 9 a.m. at the latest, like all the parking spots will be filled. And so sometimes I would have 10:30 classes, and so I would really push my luck. So I would get to school by like 10:27, like 3 minutes to find parking, and there's no parking. And so yeah, it's horrible. Like every single time I go to school and there's no parking, like you have to wait a long time. Like I've waited an hour or even more than an hour before just for parking. And so that's definitely the worst. My favorite, um, I took this class called quantitative chemistry last semester. Was last semester? Yeah, last semester. And it was just like one of my favorite classes. The lab was one of my favorite labs because I had a really cool professor. I think she was fairly new, but she was super, super nice. And she really was just like willing to help everyone. Like no matter what questions you had, she was willing to help you. And the class itself was very interesting, where that a lot of the experiments were applied to real life. Because some people in the lab were like forensic majors, forensic science majors. And so you could basically relate the lab to numerous fields. Like if you want to go pharmacy, medicine, forensic sciences, like all those labs were very much applications of real life. And so it was just like a really fun lab to me. It was a really long lab, like twice a week for I think more than 3 hours each day. And so it was really long, but I overall enjoyed the lab and my professor was like super nice. Why did you decide to go to SJSU? So, if I'm being honest, I went to San Jose State just like I didn't really want to go to San Jose State. Um, I got into a few other schools, got into San Diego State. I got in with like early acceptance or something. San Diego State, University of San Diego, and what else? I think those were the main 3. I didn't really apply to a bunch of schools because I mainly wanted to go to a UC actually. But I didn't get in. And so I was like, dang it, like, what do I do now? Like, I didn't think like this far ahead. And so I originally wanted to go to USD, but because it's a private school, it was just so expensive. And so for me, I already knew going into college that I wanted to go to grad school. So I didn't just want my undergrad, I wanted to go to grad school, which was originally pharmacy, but it was just always, I knew that I would go to grad school no matter what it was, if it was like pharmacy or PA or whatever. And so the I guess the reasonable decision was just to go to San Jose State because one, it's so much cheaper. And so that's really important to me because if I want to go to grad school is really expensive. And so I didn't want to be racking up so much debt. And so if I was going to go to grad school, I was like, I might as well go to a state school. So San Jose State, and I wouldn't have to pay for housing. So that's why I didn't choose San Diego State because that's, just more cost. And so I was just like, okay, like this is fine with me. I'll get the same quality education pretty much. And I'll be saving a lot of money for grad school. And yeah. And did you take AP Chem in high school? And if so, did it prepare you for college chem? Yes. So I took AP Chemistry with Miss Meyer my junior year. I took the AP exam, I got a 3. And so at San Jose State, I'm not sure about other schools, but I think it would be about the same. But it translated over as a chemistry class, but not the one that I needed. So because I'm a chemistry major, the chemistry that my first chemistry class I had to take was specifically for science majors. So it's called Chem 1A. That's just the class name. But AP Chem translated over as like Chem 10, which is a basic chemistry class for like English majors or something. It's just like a basic one, like the very most basic level. So it didn't translate over, so I still had to take like the first semester of Chem 1A. But honestly, it was like the same thing. Like everything I learned in AP Chem was the same thing that they taught me in that first semester. And honestly, I felt like AP Chem was so much harder than my first college chem class. And it's probably because AP Chem was like super new to me at the time. And then when I took it now, it was like, oh, like it's all just review. But I just felt like AP Chem was so much more rigorous. So if you have a chance, you should definitely take AP Chem. Miss Meyer is the best. And do you like staying close to home in Milpitas? Um, it's like yeah, I like it, but then sometimes I wish I also lived, not at home. I think something would be like it would definitely be easier to make friends if you were dorming and like just closer to campus in general. I mean, the drive isn't bad to San Jose State. It's about 20 minutes on a good day. And so it's not super far, but I mean, the convenience is there definitely if you live on campus or like super close to campus. So that's the only thing. I don't mind like living at home. I don't mind living in Milpitas. But something that is definitely a pro for living at home would be just your opportunities. So if you were to live at home, depending on like where you live, where you go to college, but like if you were still living at home, it's definitely a lot easier to get jobs that you want because of that accessibility to transportation. Like you don't have to worry about, oh, like will I have a car or can I even go this far for a job? Like for me, I work in Cupertino actually, and so it's a little bit far, but I wouldn't have that opportunity if I was like dorming on campus because dorming, you can't have a car, or you can, but like I think not within the first year or something. And so it definitely like if you were to live on campus, it kind of restricts you to find a campus job or like something that's just nearby. But if you're living at home, I feel like your opportunities are just more in a sense where you can, volunteer in nearby places or like further places and find a job somewhere else. Yeah. Any other questions? Have you ever switched your major? If so, did you find it difficult? So no, I actually did not switch my major. I applied as a biochem major to San Jose State, so I stayed with the major. But I do know it's a little bit difficult depending on what you're trying to switch from. And so, excuse me. So it depends really, because if you get into San Jose State, let's say for something that's not as competitive as, so let's say you get in for English and you want to go into engineering, which is probably I would say the most competitive major at San Jose State, that would be really difficult. So it's hard to come in as something that's not as competitive and then switch to a very competitive major because it's so that like engineering is already very like full, very impacted. So it's difficult for someone to get in there. If it was the other way around, let's say you want to go from engineering to English, I think it would be a lot easier. So it really just depends on how competitive and impacted the majors that you're switching to and from are. If you're a science major trying to switch to another science, I don't think it should be too difficult, but you won't be able to switch right away. So I know someone who was a biochem major and they wanted to switch to a like a plain bio major. And so that's going from Department of Chem to Department of Bio. And so she wasn't able to switch like right away. So she was still a bio major, or sorry, she was still a chem major for, I would say, a few semesters before she officially was able to switch. You just have to take specific classes. I think they'll tell you like you have to take the classes for the major that you're trying to switch into. And then they'll let you switch. Like you have to pass this certain point of classes before they allow you to switch.
If that's it for questions, I think we will wrap it up at 6 o'clock. So, thank you so much for coming and talking to us. I really appreciate it.